we ascribe this to? So it's like, wow, that's heavy, right? We don't like these people, right? We feel bad for them. This is a catastrophe. We ascribe this to fear, okay? Fear and misunderstanding. Because we're not afraid of what we don't know. I think this, I really believe this, but you guys can challenge me. I'm not sure that we're afraid of what we don't know. I think we're afraid of what we think we know. Does that make sense? So we have a lot of assumptions and preconceived notions about what it would be like to be disabled, right? It's almost like we intuitively know what that would be like. And that becomes our truth, right? It'd be awful. It would be horrible, right? And so because we think, we believe that's the truth, that's what scares us, right? That's the disability experience. Is mostly disabled people just want to be normal. They want to be cured. They want to be corrected at all costs, okay? And they'll do whatever it takes to be normal because it's so awful, okay? I'm being a little dramatic here. So. I wasn't even in acting school or anything, but anyway. But because we don't have this critical voice in our head about disability, we don't question that mostly. And I'm hoping some of you do, but most of us don't question it. So when you go to a movie and there's just an awful representation of disability, how many of you leave the movie and go, wow, that was pretty crappy representation of a disabled person? I mean, does that not happen very often, does it? I mean, I'm not trying to like wag my finger at you or anything, but I don't think it happens very much. How many of you have went to see, what's that one, You Before Me? Who's going to admit that they went to that movie? Okay. Okay. So You Before Me came out last summer, and you know, it just got horrible reviews by the disability community, but most of us loved it, right? It was sentimental, it was sweet, okay? But we don't leave kind of those experiences and really question them like we might do, and I want to be careful here because I'm not sure we're real good at doing this around race or gender or sexual orientation either. But I do think we're further along, and I could be wrong about that, but I have a feeling that many of us might say, wow, that was one sexist joke. I didn't like that, and they may even say something. But I'm not sure that most of us know how to do that around disability because we're so socialized into this thinking, and we've decided that mostly it's the truth, right? So we don't question it. So let's just take a look at where we're being sold this frame, okay? The big one is language. And I love this quote by Mark Twain. He says the difference between the right word and the almost right word is the difference between a lightning and a lightning bug, okay? So to me, that really says or helps us understand how powerful language is, isn't it? Okay? Because language reflects our what? Our feelings, our beliefs, our values, right? And this is not about political correctness. It's not like there's like I'm going to be the disability language police and tell you this is what you should use, really. But it's about saying what we mean, saying what we value, saying what we believe, right? Because what we call people is sometimes how we treat them, isn't it? So I'll give you a quick example of me. When I was younger, as I said, I was mostly into the brave and courageous and inspirational track. But I also loved sports. And so I learned to ski, and I lived in Colorado. And I skied with, I had these full-length fiberglass braces, and then I had, they're called outriggers. So they're like a crutch with a little ski on it, okay? It takes the place of a ski pole. So I was pretty good, too. I actually was the national 4-track ski champion 2 years in a row. Right. So I loved to ski, and I skied a lot. But almost every time that I would go up on the mountain, somebody, and I'm not being dramatic, somebody, at least one person would come up to me and say, "What is it that you're doing? Oh my gosh. What is this? What do you call this?" Right? And you know, I'd get so frickin' aggravated because it was like I'm skiing, right? Now, I could say I'm 4-track skiing. That would be, I would say that because it's a little different skiing. But they wouldn't ask me that. They would say, like, what is it that you're doing, right? And then, of course, can you imagine what that was followed by? It's like, oh my God, you're such an inspiration. And I never saw them doing that to any of the other skiers. So I was pretty sure it was me, right? But I'm just saying that value and belief about me and my condition comes across in how they communicated with me, right? Could have said, gee, I've never seen those kinds of ski poles. What are those called? I would have been fine, right? So language is powerful. And what happens around disability is we get a lot of crappy language, okay? And I hope I don't put anything up here that I'm pretty sure none of you in here would have ever said any of these words, okay? So, but we have a lot of euphemisms. So here's a big one that people love to do. They put DIS in little caps and then ability in caps. So why do you think they do that? What do you think they're trying to get? What are they trying to say here? Huh? Yeah, right. That it's sort of a way to kind of tell me I'm okay, right? Or us, that we're okay, right? So but what are they centering here? Ability, aren't they? As if disabled people don't have ability, right? But disability studies is telling us disability has nothing to do with ability, okay? It's not about that. It's about exclusion and othering and discrimination. It has nothing to do. Nobody's saying we don't have abilities, okay? But society mostly thinks that's what it's about. It's like we want to make sure you know that we think you have something to offer, right? So they do this thing. Now, because there's mostly women in the room, I know there's a few men, but how would you all feel if you saw WO in small letters and MEN in caps? What would be your reaction to that? Right? Might send you over the edge, right? So it really is similar, okay? It's what's getting centered. And we know that men have nothing to do with women, right? Teasing. Just teasing. The other one is special needs, okay? Now, I'll bet some of you use special needs, you suppose? Special needs is a great euphemism, mostly used by special education actually uses it a lot, okay? But again, the scholars, and when I say scholars, I mean disability studies, is saying this is just another way to other people, okay? And why would my need for an accessible bathroom be any different than your need for a bathroom, right? Why is my need special, okay? We all have need for a bathroom. Okay? But what happens is my needs become special needs, okay? And not just mine. This isn't just about me. But we do that for disabled people, that's a way to other them, is using this euphemism. Another one is differently abled, and that's kind of similar. It's back to, yes, you have abilities, they're different, but they're okay. And this is one called, that I get a lot, is I don't think of you as disabled. So what's the message there? I don't think of you as disabled. Huh? I don't think of you as disabled, right?
I had a blind friend, and I said to her one time, didn't you see that kid at the hospital who they shaved half of his head? And she goes, Margaret, I'm blind. I took that as a compliment.
Right.
It's,
Right. And some of that we do overlook, like somebody will say, hey, you want to go for a walk? I'm not going to get too riled up about that.
They want you to wheel along with them.
Right. I try not to go crazy about this stuff. But I don't think of you as disabled is a tough one, because it's like that's really kind of reinforcing that notion that disability is so bad, isn't it? And you're not that. Okay? Wheelchair bound, I mean, my God, that's awful, right? I just want you all to know I get out of the chair. I am not bound to it. But victim, we often say that, oh, victim of a stroke or victim of this, right? Courageous and brave. Freak, psycho, retard. I hear those on campus all the time. Yep. Mentally challenged. Gag, right? And again, overcoming your disability. Again, that implies that this is such a bad thing, right? That you've got to overcome it. So euphemisms are problematic. And just to be clear, because I don't want to complicate this, but I just want you to know that the scholars and the activists will say, the word is disability, just use it, right? We're claiming that word, right? Disability. So you don't have to avoid it. You could say person with a disability if you want to. We're not going to quibble about it. I won't, even though I would say I'm a disabled woman. If you wanted to call me a person with a disability, I'll be fine. But I'm just saying disability is the word, and you really probably won't get into trouble for using that one. Then we have microaggressions. You guys all know what microaggressions are. You've probably heard this before, right? So microaggressions are kind of a same line of with the words, right? Because they're sort of these everyday little slights or snubs or insults. And they're not always unintentional. Sometimes they're intentional, right? And they can communicate kind of a negative message, right? So if when they say, what happened to you, I see that as a microaggression. Why would you say that to me? It's a little snub. It's a little reminder that you're different, right? And I need to know, right? You need to tell me. But here's some others. He always matches so nicely, right? I have a blind friend who gets that all the time. And he's like, I got a system here. It's not anything you need to get real worried about, but the other one is offers of help, okay? So it's overwhelming to disabled people the amount of offers of help they get in a day, right? And again, I know I can sound dramatic, but I can get easily 10, 12 offers of help in a day, okay? And I think I look pretty competent. So I kind of wonder, what is it that I'm doing that prompts people to want to say, let me help you, okay? But it's a lot. And oftentimes when I say, oh, no, thanks, they'll say, are you sure? And it's like, I'm 68 years old. I know what I need, right? The other one is like, people will say, oh, it's so distracting. The interpreter should stand in the back, or turn the captioning off. It's so distracting, okay? Or you'll get, oh, I totally understand what's going on. I broke my leg and I was on crutches for 6 weeks. It's like, okay, yeah, right, you really get it. You're really oppressed, okay? Or he's kind of strange. I think he's somewhere on the spectrum, okay?
What can you say then?
Not that. Or you guys are such an inspiration, right? And oftentimes when I'm, especially if I'm with another wheelchair user, people say, hey, you want to race? You know? And it's like, just leave me alone, right? I'm just going for a walk here. Now, the last one, this is my mother talking. Because even as a little kid, I didn't react well to this. I don't know where I got that, but, and she would always say, oh, be nice. They were just trying to help, you know? But that to me is sort of another little insult. It's like, what do you mean, be nice, you know? I mean, I didn't usually, I don't think I was that mean, but I might not be real open to it. But here, the other part of this is charity. And I suspect that many of us are involved in kind of charitable causes, right? Because charity is a real, it's kind of a goodwill toward humanity, isn't it? Right? It's a generosity. It's a helpfulness. So it's perceived as a positive and a sweet human value, right? But disability studies says it's also a mechanism of social control and oppression, okay? So just imagine that for a minute, right? Because A, it's oftentimes, especially disability charities, are led and controlled by non-disabled people, okay? So it's sort of that helping the helpless kind of notion. I think sometimes we see charities as a way to avoid our social obligations about access. It's like, well, if I contribute to the charity, we don't really need to do anything else, right? We don't need to really remove these barriers. Instead, I'll support the Muscular Dystrophy Association, okay? So charity evokes those emotions of pity and fear and guilt. And we use it to raise money, don't we? Because that's what gets money, right? Is kind of play on people's heartstrings. So we use images and language that really build upon and promote these stereotypes that we're trying to get rid of, right? So if we want to remove the stereotype of us as dependent and tragic, how do you raise money in ways that doesn't reinforce that? Does that make sense? So we get a lot of stuff like this, like someone I love needs a cure, right? We don't have too many telethons anymore, but we used to have, remember telethons, right? Those were particularly hard because A, they were on TV and everybody was watching them. But, you know, and I don't need to read this, but it's a brochure about the Miracle League, and it's, you know, kind of, a word I use is schmaltzy, little schmaltzy. But a cure to be free again, right? Love, hope, cure. Run for kids who can't, okay? So we charities have, and I guess sort of in their defense, have a hard time figuring out how do we get support and raise money and at the same time honor this new way of thinking. And I think it's challenging. I do. But if we all started thinking differently, right, maybe we wouldn't need our heartstrings pulled on in order to support something. But here's movies, right? Here's another spot where this frame is really reinforced, right? All of the stereotypes. Just so you know, I think every Disney movie has a disabled character, and they're usually the villain, or not always, but I'm thinking of Dumbo. He really wasn't a villain, but you know what I mean. Typically, every movie has a disabled character. And every James Bond movie, the villain has a disability. So just think about that. So movies, we get represented as villains, as criminals, victims, sometimes inspirations, okay? Charity cases, human interest pieces. The other one is drunk driving ad campaigns. Have you ever seen these? You know, you would think death would be about the worst, right? But oftentimes, drunk driving campaigns use the fear of becoming disabled as sort of the worst thing that could happen to you. So here's a couple of examples. If you think seat belts are confining, think about a wheelchair. Or last summer, 1,057 teenagers got so drunk they couldn't stand up ever, okay? And I like the parking one. It says every 48 seconds a drunk driver makes another person eligible to park here, okay? So again, not a good idea to drink and drive, is it? That is not a good idea. And certainly none of us in the disability studies area are suggesting it is. But again, to use this really creates, again, reinforces that notion of how catastrophic disability is. So poor design is another place where if you're not looking for it, you won't notice it. But poor design is another way of saying you got a problem, right? So let's say if Stephanie wants to take me out to dinner some night, which would, might be your turn. Yeah. So let's say she wants to take me out to dinner to some new fancy restaurant that she loves. And we get to the restaurant, and lo and behold, there's some steps going up, okay? And I didn't bring my crutches. I'm using my chair. And Stephanie says to me, "Oh, Sue, why didn't you bring your crutches?" And then she might even go further and say, "Did you quit doing PT? Because now you can't use your crutches anymore," right? So what is Stephanie telling me?
It's your fault.
It's my, right? My fault, isn't it? It's my problem. You can't, I want to go eat and you can't get up here, and how come you didn't work harder, right?
Don't they have to be accessible?
No, I know, but this is just an example. Well, we have to be careful of that because not everything is accessible.
My dad was 90 years old and went to the Golden Lamb Inn in Ohio, which is the oldest inn in Ohio. And he came in through the front door, or through the window, that they were able to pull out and put a ramp in, and he came in that way. And after he was amputated, he came in with his he had a prosthesis, and he walked in for his 90th birthday. And I was so thrilled that they were accessible.
That they had done something.
They had done something, and they said, "We are accessible."
Right.
I mean, I had no idea how I was going to get
Right.
him in there, but I've always thought about that and thought, the oldest inn in Ohio
Can do it.
can do it. Anybody can do it.
That's right.
And a window, literally, they pull out.
Yeah, and technically, yes, but there are many places that are not accessible. Go to New York. It's like, yikes. But anyway, so back to Stephanie. She takes me to this restaurant, and there's stairs, and she says, "How come you didn't bring your crutches?" Okay? But then let's say that she's had an epiphany, right? And so we go, and we get there, and what does she say if she's had an epiphany? What do you say?
Let's go to another restaurant.
Yeah, so you have no clue. Okay. Anybody have an idea of what she might say if she's after she's been to one of my lectures? Huh? What's wrong with this restaurant? Exactly, right? She would say, "This restaurant has a problem," right? So does that make sense? It's like, where is the problem? And the problem is, disability studies would tell us, is the problem not solely, I don't want to go crazy here, but oftentimes the problem is mostly in our language, our attitudes, right, and the design of our environment, right? And if we put our effort there, much of this would disappear. Not solely, but okay. I mean, no matter how accessible every place is, I still am not going to walk, okay? So I don't want to discount that either, that there's still going to be these kind of personal stuff, okay? But disability studies is saying, let's solve where mostly the problem is, okay? So poor design is a big one. And I just threw some examples up here. You know, look at all the places you go where there's no captioning, right? Go to a movie, no captions, or no audio description. Think of the high-stakes exams, right? And they're timed, aren't they? So if somebody, let's say, processes information at a different rate, right? Then they go to a high-stakes exam and have to complete something in 50 minutes, right? That's a design problem. That's not their problem, just because they process information at a different rate. But we make it their problem, right? It's like, whoa, you know, what you could do is you could go see an educational specialist and really take a lot of these practice tests until you work up to getting the time down. But that's what we do, right? So, what is the possible effect that these words, images, and design can have on shaping our notions about disabled people? And also on disabled people's notion of themselves, right? What does this all teach us about disability and impairment, okay? And that's why we are stuck in this frame, is because this is what we get day in and day out, okay? So we learn that disability deserves pity and fear. We learn that it's inspiring, right? Which I know we could say, oh, that's a positive thing. But that is problematic too, isn't it? Because then it's like, oh, it's kind of like me growing up, right? That's a lot of work to be inspiring all the time. So again, it's like, how can we just be ourselves, right? Be regular. It also helps jerks become human, and you'll see this a lot. I don't mean to sound too irreverent here, but did anybody see Rain Man? Right? He was a real jerk, wasn't he? And who helped him? Right? His brother with autism. So this is a theme that you'll see a lot, is that this notion of there but for the grace of God, right, helps people to be better, okay? And also that it's expensive. So we get that a lot. Interpreters are way too expensive, right? We can't afford that. Captioning's too expensive, right? If I have to take that window out and put a wheelchair in, we just don't have the money for that. So it often gets equated as a money issue. So anybody ever read George Lakoff's something about the elephant? Don't think of an elephant. Did anybody ever read that? It's really, I think, a political thing. It's about how different political parties frame an issue. But he says, know your values and frame the debate. And I really think that's what we're trying to do here, is what are our values and beliefs, you said that so well, related to disability and difference, and then how do we frame this, okay? So I'm just going to throw this up here because I don't want to spend a lot of time on it, but it's mostly about really saying human variation is natural, right? It's vital. You know, inclusion and full participation is a matter of social justice, okay? But design is powerful, and that we are all designers, right? And that good design is essential for achieving access and full participation. So think about what our values are, and then we should respond that way, right? So disability reframed, right, is really about that, is that impairment is common, it's ordinary, it's part of human life, okay? And that disability is primarily exclusion. It's not about ability, it's about people being excluded. And that lack of access and integration is really mostly a design and attitude problem, okay? So that's sort of the way to think differently about this. I think you all can relate to design, right? You've probably got examples of like, geez, this iPhone, I cannot figure it out, or my TV remote, right? Design impacts all of us, and it can include us or it can exclude us, right? And what happens relative to disability, because we have sort of this normal standard, and if you fall outside of the bell curve too far, then this is what you run into, is this is not designed for me, okay? This test isn't designed for me. This policy isn't designed for me, okay? I gotta get going here. And I just, again, it's about design. Research shows that captioned media increases literacy skills in people of all ages. So it's like, why wouldn't we have everything captioned, right? So, what time is it? Does anybody have? Okay, I just want to quickly share with you. So this is Jeff Raskin, who's an Apple computer guy, made this quote that design is a moral issue. And I just threw this cartoon up there because I think it's funny. Because it's an example of poor design, right? But he said design is a moral issue. And if you think about it, it really is, right? Because it can include or exclude. So what's happened as a result of activism and scholars is that disabled voices are now saying, hey, we want to weigh in on this, right? So there's art and performance art and cartoons, okay? And I just want to share, here's a t-shirt, right? I'm just in it for the parking, right? Because we get that a lot. It's like, oh, do you really deserve this parking, right? But here's an interesting cartoon, and I know you're not going to laugh, but I want you to, well, you can laugh. I think it's hilarious. But, so, you got two heads, right? One head has a patch, so he must have a vision impairment. But he goes, people like you are a real inspiration to me, right? That's funny. But what's the message here? What are they trying to tell? This is by a disabled cartoonist. What do you think his message is to us? Right? But he's also making a kind of a point about that whole inspiration stuff, isn't it? That we fall into. It's like, you're so amazing, right? I can't believe you got up this morning, right? So he's kind of poking at that concept of inspiration. Here's another one. It's a welcome double arm amputee therapy group, right? And the woman says, I need a hug. I'm so glad you're laughing, because I think these are funny. So what do you think the message is here? What do you think he's trying to tell us? Anybody got an idea? Right? He's trying to show us where the problem is, right? Who's got the problem in this? Right? The woman with arms has got the problem. They're fine. So he's kind of turning that, isn't he? Because we always think the disabled person is the problem. But there's also art that disabled people are doing, right? Here's a woman with scoliosis, and here's a photograph of a nude woman with impairment. Dance, okay? There's a lot of dance and movement, okay? I love this. Johnny Crescendo, the Tragic but Brave Band. Don't you love that? Again, it's really poking at us, isn't it? It's like tragic but brave. He's got a whole band over in the UK, and they do great music. And then there's poetry. Cheryl Marie Wade just recently passed away, but has really quite profound poetry about the disability experience. Here's another artist, Ernie Papillon, buffalo hunter. He's a Native American guy. And of course, we all know Frida Kahlo, right? she did a lot of her artwork was around her experience with disability. So here's where I want to leave you, okay? So this is a cartoon. It's two old guys sitting on a porch, and they said, I think if I had to do it all over again, I'd sit on this chair frontwards, okay? So, I think that's what I'm really wanting to leave you with tonight is, can we think differently? Like, do we have to wait until we're too old to do anything about it, right? We can start now. We don't have to kind of stay on this path, okay? Because people with disabilities are reminded hourly, and I know this sounds dramatic, but hourly, that they are disabled, okay, by society. They get that either through the offers of help constantly, they get it through the language, through the media, through design. It's constant reminder that I am other, okay? And again, I hope I don't sound too whiny, but it isn't about you individually, but it's about society and how we respond to this. So if we want to change that, right? And if we really want to embrace difference, because I see it as bigger than just disability. It's like we have a lot of differences that cause us a lot of angst, right? We get all wrapped up in, gender identity, race, religion. We just are troubled by difference. And I'm just saying that if we really want to change that, right, we need to really start thinking differently and putting on a little critical thinking hat and question what it is we think we know, okay? And align our language and our behavior with those beliefs and values. Because if we value difference, then we should align our behavior with that, okay? See disabled people as multifaceted, right? And consume media and all this stuff with a critical lens. So that is, does anybody have any questions about that? Anything that I can muddy up for you or apologize for?
If you have a question, please come up to the mic so everybody can hear.
Oh, you were great. Thank you for putting up with me.